All right. So when we start looking at why is everybody sick, we look at the chronic disease issues in the United States, and let's just stick with the United States right now. When we start looking at why everybody's sick, it always comes down to metabolic function. We've known this for a long time. It's been kind of withheld from the public because metabolic function and pharmaceutical function don't work together. Pharmaceutical function actually pushes against metabolic function, and so that's why we take all these drugs, but we don't get any better. So what we have to start looking at is, okay, what is the genesis of all the things that are going on? So we've got all the toxic chemicals in our food, water, and air, the atrazine, the glyphosate, all that type of stuff, all of the fake chemicals in our food. But if you start looking at the studies that our medical group in our country was very, very, very hesitant to do, which is the vaccinated versus unvaccinated health studies, what you find is that everyone who took vaccines, childhood vaccines, is significantly less healthy than people who didn't take vaccines. So let's put aside the idea that the vaccines were designed specifically to hurt people and specifically to create long-term profit for pharmaceutical groups. We know that there's very high evidence between the Epstein files and what Bill Gates said, that the COVID vaccine's point and job was to kill a bunch of people. Gates said he wanted to use vaccines to remove 15% of the population of the earth. And so that's also what some of the Epstein files have been saying. So I understand that it's easy to then say, okay, well, the childhood vaccines were designed to create illness because that's what they're doing. I'm not going to argue that point. I think it's very obvious. The chiropractic community, the natural community, have been talking about this for 20 years. So this isn't a brand new thing that, oh my gosh, no one said anything. No one's looked at this. Look at the people who are called quacks, like the chiropractic community, the natural community, the metabolic and physiological community, who are saying that the childhood vaccines are one of the major reasons that we're so sick, why we have ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, autism, all these neurologic development issues. That's why we're seeing so many other issues. But the other thing is that they damage the gut. And when you start damaging the gut, you start damaging the body's ability to produce and utilize hormones properly. That's when everything starts going sideways. If you'll look back, if you're 45 or you're 40, you'll understand, you'll remember that people were talking about how horrible steroids were and how bad hormones were, and we can't use hormones because they're all going to cause cancer and everything else. We've known for 30 years they don't have any play in creating or pushing up cancer. They don't do all the things that you've been lied to about. So the problem that we get into, like for instance, you look at testosterone. If you look at what testosterone can prevent, it can prevent erectile dysfunction, but then we don't have Viagra. It can prevent depression, but then we don't have SSRIs. It can prevent all sorts of different inflammatory issues in the blood vessels and arteries, but then we don't have statins. And so there's a bunch of things you can do. It can help with fat loss, but then we don't have all the fat drugs. So there's a bunch of things that it does naturally because our body was designed to have it, but we waged, our politicians and our medical institutions waged a war on utilizing it for so long. Estrogen, for example, can stop UTI infections in older women. The reason that we're not using that is because if an older woman gets a UTI, it's 10 days until they die, but it's 10 days in the ICU, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they don't want to see that hundreds of thousands of dollars go away. So they don't give women the estrogens they need. Your body is based on hormone function. The GLP-3s, the GLP-1s, those are all hormone function. When you tell the body, hey, here's some glucagon, your body goes, oh, glucagon is the hormone or the signal or the message that I'm supposed to burn fat for fuel. All right, cool. We'll do that. Well, what keeps your body from using glucagon? High functional and high insulin. Insulin literally shuts off glucagon. Well, what's all of our food been processed? What's our government been telling us we should eat? Grains. Remember the old, the food pyramid before RFK changed it? That was heavily influenced by money and lobbying. The whole bottom of it was grains. They told you don't eat meat. Meat's bad for you. Don't eat, the proper oils. Those are bad for you. We're going to use seed oils. We're going to use industrial, fake oils, not from the earth. That's what's healthy for you. The Diabetic Association has been pushing things that create diabetes for a long time. Cereal and orange juice for breakfast because it's healthy. No, it pushes high glycemic function. So there's a whole lot of what we've been being told from our government and our more or less our government and our pharmaceutical and industrial food lobbies that are 100% lies. The reason that we're all sick is that we're not doing the things that we know we need to be doing. We're not balancing our hormones. We're taking a whole bunch of drugs. Now that the information is officially out that childhood vaccines create a lot more problems than they solve, with inflammation and ADD, all sorts of neurodegenerative diseases, autoimmune diseases, allergy issues like peanuts and eggs and things like that. Now that that information is starting to come out, we're starting to get that actual information. People are opting not to do these vaccines, and their kids are going to end up being healthier for it, according to the research from the Ford study. So when we start looking at, everything that's poised against us, the Epstein files have helped a lot with this, because I think people are starting to wake up and realize that our government has no functional push to help us. We're just, here for money and for experimental purposes. I think that's starting to help kind of people figure out, all these chemicals are making me sick. And, when I go eat the bread and the pasta in Italy, I don't have celiac issues. I don't have all these issues. Why? Because they don't allow the chemicals there that we use here, the glyphosates and the things like that. So a lot of the stuff, the reason that we're so sick isn't because we don't take enough drugs. It's not because we don't take enough supplements. It's exercise that plays a role. But a lot of the stuff that's being pushed on us is killing us. And the thing is that we're being distracted with, oh, look at these drugs and look at this new technology and look at this thing, and all these things, but we're not focusing on the things that are actually problematic. How are you poisoning yourself on a daily basis? How have you been poisoned since you were young? These are the things we need to start working on. So there's a lot of stuff to start working out, cleaning out some of the childhood vaccines, to be able to do some of that. I would be very, very cautious of which ones you take. And I would talk to the doctors and figure out what the likelihood is. So for instance, you're like, oh, tetanus is really bad, you got to get a tetanus shot. Well, how often are you going to be around sharp objects and poop? Because that's how you get it. If you're like, never, well, you might not need it. So those sort of things. The Hep B shot, which a lot of doctors are pushing, which is interesting, because when you start looking at the Epstein files of, well, why would so many people be so adamant that we make sure babies are protected from sexually transmitted diseases? Okay. There's a whole bunch of babies that, Jewish babies that die from, because when in the Jewish faith, not always, but a lot of times when they do circumcision, the priest will actually suck the blood off the penis as part of a ritual, and they get herpes that way, and it's toxic. So there's a lot of that type of stuff as well. That's why, we got to get all these vaccines to, fix all these diseases that your baby's probably not logically going to come in contact with, unless we're doing something ritualistic that isn't part of natural, normal growth. So a lot of the stuff that we need to start kind of walking it through all the way from birth and start looking at, when they're like, oh, well, we're going to give your kid all these injections. Do they need them? And don't ask the guy who's selling them. It's like if you go to the car dealership and you're like, do I really need this new feature? Like, oh, it's the best. You totally have to. It's only $1,000 more. You got to get it. Like the guy who's selling it's obviously going to tell you it's important. So I would look at other sources. Look at the Ford study. Look at what some of the people, the detractors, are saying about it. Listen to the moms who talk about how the kid was one way, got a vaccine, and then within a day or two they were a different way, or they started having epilepsy, or they started acting different, or they started crying all the time, whatever. There's tons and tons and tons of that. That's the thing that turned me, was talking to all the moms. I was already kind of on the fence, and talking to the moms and the dads of people who had autism and had significant reactions to vaccines. That was the thing. And so the idea that the medical doctors are not listening to their patients at all, or that people who are getting vaccines and going back into them and saying, hey, this is what happened within a week of the vaccine, I don't believe that they're not being told this. I don't believe that they don't know about this. So it is one of those things. I wouldn't ask a medical doctor why you shouldn't buy their product. I would go do research elsewhere, listen to what they say, and then listen to what everybody else says and be like, which one of these do I really believe more of? There's a lot more research out now. But the reason that we're all sick is because of the things that we allow. If we would start using farmers markets more, we'd start eating real food more, that would be really, really beneficial to your health. Getting out in the sun, moving, trying to get away from the stress, trying to get from the crazy that we're being pumped all day long. Find some beneficial things to follow on social media that give you bright, happy, sunny, fun news, not just chaos and horribleness all the time. Work on that psyche piece. But that's why we're all sick. It's because of the chemicals that we're allowing in our food, water, and air, and indeed injected into our bodies, and the way that we're allowing function to go. Like there's been several studies that talk about depression and mental health issues from antibiotic use, overuse of antibiotics. So there's several doctors out right now that are curing things like depression and schizophrenia and psychosis and OCD and all sorts of other things just by changing diet. We see a giant change in metabolic function and overall health from using peptides to reset the normal metabolic pathway. Like for instance, like again, not to talk about Reddit like it's the greatest thing in the world, but when you start balancing that insulin glucagon ratio, lots of things start getting better. Your body becomes more insulin sensitive. We start detoxing a bunch of stuff. We start getting rid of the excess fat in the liver and around the liver. That fat is metabolically active. It produces cytokines, which is inflammatory. So there's a bunch of stuff that the reason we're so sick is because we're being kept sick on purpose. That's the only way to look at it, because we know that the chemicals that are in our food, water, and air are toxic. We know that for a fact, but our government is doing nothing to reduce them. In fact, the one thing they are doing is that they're voting now to give chemical companies immunity from any damage. So if we find out that, 20 years of us knowing that glyphosate creates cancer and is toxic and bad for the gut, okay, well, you can't sue the chemical companies now because, the government has decided to give them immunity. So look into that stuff, because that's literally being voted on and passed right now, that you can't sue a chemical company for using chemicals they knew were toxic for 20 years on you and damaging you and your kids. So that's kind of some of the stuff that's going on. If you're wanting to push back against this, you're going to have to do it for your family. You're going to have to do it for yourselves. There isn't really a group that's doing it. You're going to find people to follow to kind of help out with some of this stuff. But that's kind of where all of this is. I think it was hilarious because there's all this stuff like, oh my God, a baby died from listeria from drinking raw milk. Are you going to talk about all the ones who died from eating lettuce? The listeria outbreak from lettuce is a lot worse than the one kid who might have had an issue with raw milk. So, it is kind of interesting what they're pushing back against. I love all the craziness that the alcohol industry is paying for, bashing on cannabis right now. Like I don't know that Dr. Amen was paid by the Alcohol Institute, but his research was laughable. It is embarrassing. His research on how cannabis makes your brain, it eats your brain. No, that was junk science, and he knew it from the beginning. But yeah, so there's a lot of things going on. The easiest way to do it is how clean can you get? How few chemicals can you get in your food, water, and air? Process and clean out all the trash that's in your water. This is a big deal I don't think people know about. If you look at your shower heads after you've used them for 3 or 4 or 5 months, there's a buildup on there of different colored molds and different colored sediment that's on there. That's in your hot water. When you get that steam going in your shower and you're breathing all that stuff in. So make sure that you're filtering that stuff out. Whole house water filtration is a really, really great way to do it. If you can only afford, you can only get access to filtering the water at the shower head, definitely do that. But that's the reason. You're like, well, we got to take this supplement, and we have to take NAD. You wouldn't have to do that if you weren't being poisoned every step of the way. So that's why we're sick. That's what's going on. The supplements and everything, and the peptides and everything can help push back against it. But until we stop poisoning ourselves, we're all going to be sick. So keep that in mind. If you guys have any questions, hit up questions@chalmerswellness.com or drop in the comments. Thanks for your time. Have a fabulous day.